Okay, you guys, thank you for coming. My name is Michelle. For those of you that I haven't met, I run the Women's Network here. I am very excited today to be interviewing Stacey Epstein, who is the CEO of one of our Dish partners. Rob, who sits on our steering committee, was kind enough to connect us over the summer, and we're very excited to have her here today to talk about her career path, what she does, how they partner with Dish, and then lots of wisdom. I've seen some of her writing already, so I know you guys are going to really enjoy hearing from her. Thanks to all the people who are live streaming as well. We're excited to be using the Dish View platform again, so thanks to Jeff and Wes, who continue to make sure that even at our remote chapters, you guys get to watch as well. So we hope you enjoy, and with that, I'm going to start right in with Stacey. Why don't we start off with a little bit of a background on your career and who you are?
Okay, great. Thank you all for having me. Thanks for coming today. Always nice to see new faces, especially at customers. You guys are one of our most beloved and VIP customers. So thank you for having me here today. We were just chatting about the area. I'm actually from Albuquerque, New Mexico, so not too far away. And went to college in Atlanta, Georgia. I kind of have been all over, but I went to Emory. I studied English and played soccer. I thought I wanted to be a sportscaster back when there were no sportscasters. Anybody who's old enough to remember that. Now they're everywhere, but when I was in college, there literally was not one. And I thought, well, it's a perfect combination of sports and English and, you know, broadcasting, and I don't care there's not one. I'm going to go be the only one. And I moved to San Francisco after college, just kind of wanted to get back to the West Coast, and needed a job. And I realized then how hard it was actually going to be to get that job that I wanted. Even getting a job in broadcast at all meant you had to go to a super small town. You were going to make like $14,000 a year, and you were probably going to be working all nights and weekends. And I was still determined to do it, but I needed a job, right? I was living in San Francisco. I had to pay the bills, had an English degree, and I ended up getting a job at Oracle, which at the time was a relatively small company. I remember telling people, I work at Oracle. It's a software company. Like, nobody really knew what Oracle was. And I was an admin to an admin. So basically, when people went to her and said, hey, can you fax this, and can you mail this, she would then give it to me. It was an interesting job. I remember thinking to myself, in the time it took them to come ask her to fax it and then her ask me, like, why couldn't they have just faxed it themselves? So I maybe wasn't perfectly suited for that role. But the truth is that high tech and Oracle at that time, and this is in the early 90s, so I can date myself, was just such a hot and fast growing industry, and different than it is now, because I think now it's so obvious. We all have phones. Technology is part of our everyday lives. It wasn't the case then. It was mostly for businesses. But Oracle was it was tripling all the time. It was just becoming this very, very big company, and because of that, if you were ambitious and you showed an interest in advancing, there was an opportunity for you, because they could not find people fast enough. It was still not a very easy place for women. There were no role models in leadership, literally none. In my entire 6 years I spent at Oracle, there was one like VP who was a woman, and she was very much my role model. But there was also just this understanding of, like, we just need smart, good people, so you want to move up, you can move up. So I kind of just, like, every 6 months, just made a little step up here and got kind of interested in marketing. There was a job, like, running events, and I moved into that job. And then I started getting into, well, how can we make these events better versus just planning the logistics of them and getting into the content side. I sort of got over my belief that to be successful in tech, you needed to be technical or an engineer, right? I had an English degree, right? And I sort of thought, well, I can never go anywhere in tech because I'm not an engineer. And realized that tech companies need marketing people, and they need communicators, and they need salespeople. So I spent about 6 years just kind of working my way up. I moved to DC for a time. I lived in New York for a time, all with Oracle. Eventually ended up in a role maybe not that dissimilar to what you do, But I was managing some of the global partner relationships for Oracle. So some of the big companies that were building their products on top of Oracle, companies like PeopleSoft, like a lot of these big software companies were built on an Oracle database, and I was managing the relationship between those two companies. And every once in a while I watch a sports game and I'm like, God, that would have actually been really fun too. But I pretty much never looked back. I mean, I really found that what I thought was, oh, I just have this English degree. My parents were always saying, what are you going to do with an English degree? And I realized that so much of business is writing, communicating, analyzing, understanding, being able to put something into a way that is compelling to other people. I mean, that's marketing, right? And so I realized that leaning on a lot of those skills that I learned in college actually were of benefit to me. I ended up joining one of the companies that was my partner, so a very early CRM company called Clarify, which ironically is sort of a predecessor to what we do at Zinc today. But they were one of the first CRM companies, so I went there, was on the sales team, kind of went to a few different startups, eventually realized that marketing was just my thing. Ended up being I think I was around employee 50 at a then startup called SuccessFactors. Do you guys use SuccessFactors? Okay. So I joined there before they had a marketing department. So it was really early, and I was the first marketing hire. So built the team, kind of grew with that company. The company was just growing like wildfire, and helped take them public in 2007. And then 2009, and we talked about this a little bit, and maybe we can get into it more, but 2009, I got pregnant, went out on maternity leave. There was no maternity policy. And I was an executive, I was running marketing. I was an executive in the company, and I still couldn't even convince our CEO that we needed a maternity policy for all these women. Anyway, had my daughter, went out on leave, had such a bitter taste in my mouth for that experience. And also, I had a big, huge global job, and I just didn't think that I could be a great mom and go back to that same job. So never went back after having my first child. That was in 2009. And joined I was the 15th person in the company, a company called ServiceMax, which is a competitor to the Oracle TOA product that you guys use, so a field service management solution. Great CEO, basically. I worked with him at SuccessFactors, and he was the CEO. He had been the head of sales, and he said, I don't need full-time marketing. Why don't you come work half-time? I'll give you full benefits. It'll be a great job for you as a new mom. I was a single mom at the time too, so it really was I didn't even care what the company did. I was like, field service, okay, whatever. I'll just market, and maybe I'll go get another job someday. And that, I know I'm preaching to the choir here. Field service was just neglected by tech, right? Tech was automating finance and marketing and sales, and everywhere companies were focusing on areas of the business that they could help through technology, but really nobody had done a lot of great stuff for field service teams, and ServiceMax was really one of the first, in addition to TOA, in the cloud, just focus on the job of a field service technician, and because of that, it was wildly successful. So I was there running the marketing function for about 6 years. ServiceMax ended up getting acquired by GE for $1 billion a couple years ago. And I kind of, got married, had another kid, life continued on. And the CEO of ServiceMax, who is a man named Dave Yarnold, and I had worked with him numerous times over my career. Every time I would talk to him about future career growth, he would say, you have to be a CEO. And I remember thinking to myself, no way. And at the time I thought, well, I know what you do. I work directly for the CEO at SuccessFactors. I work directly for him at ServiceMax. I felt like I had good visibility into his job. And I thought, I know what you do, and I don't think I can be the kind of mom that I want to be and do that job. And so he would say it, and I would say, no, not interested. No, I like what I do. No. And then I had left ServiceMax. I was kind of trying to figure out, what am I going to do next? And I started getting calls for CEO jobs. And I remember hanging up from the first call and thinking to myself, I had this self-realization that absolutely, yes, I had kind of resisted the notion of being a CEO because of my desire to be a good mom and not thinking I could do both, which is a fallacy I want to shut down in the world. But I also realized that I never really thought I would be considered for it. And it was, I hadn't even been aware of that, but I got off the call and I remember this feeling of like, I'm so honored that they actually thought of me. Like, I realized that I had this insecurity that I didn't even, it was so far in my subconscious. And it was a very interesting process for me through the whole, like, talking to companies that were entertaining hiring me as their CEO and working through those insecurities that I had, that like maybe I wasn't good enough to be that, right? And so now that I am a CEO and I got over those two things, now I'm sort of on a mission, because I think that both of those feelings that I had are so common, especially among women, right? We get out of college, we start thinking about when and if we're going to have kids, and then we look at our careers and we think, okay, but you know, at some point I'm going to have to like kind of decide, right? And I love to do this, and since we have a fair amount of men in the room, I'll do this now. How many of you have kids? Okay, good number of you. How many of you, when you were pregnant, were asked if you're going back to work? Okay, notice that no men ever get asked if they're going back to work, right? Like, why would you even ask a man that? Like, of course a man's going back to work, right? But for some reason, we are expected that we have to make a choice. And so one of my sort of platforms that I like to talk about is helping women understand that you don't have to make a choice, right? And the world is getting much more accepting of women having big jobs. But that's one of the things that I've done a lot of writing about, and I like to talk about, is how can you figure out how to not step away from your career and still be I coach my daughter's first grade soccer team. I am cutting a really important trip next week short because my other daughter's in a play. Like, you can do it. Sometimes it means sacrificing work. Usually, if you're doing a good job, that's okay. And then the other side, which is those kind of deep-seated insecurities. And I think it partly comes from lack of role models, right? And there is a bias. Right? Just yesterday, I was having a conversation with somebody about, those feelings sometimes when you think to yourself, yeah, this person is not gonna give me the respect because I am a woman. And unfortunately, it still happens. So. Yeah. A very long answer to your question.
A great intro. So this leads in, I'm going to skip a couple of questions down, because a lot of what you talked about reflects what we're seeing in the Women in the Workplace study for now the third year in a row. So McKinsey and Lean In, for those of you who haven't read it, I recommend taking a look at the 2018 Women in the Workplace report, which dropped last week. They survey companies across the US and then provide back kind of a readout on what's going on for women in the workplace. And a phenomenon that they talk a lot about is the ambition gap and the second shift. So a lot of women say, the hurdles and the obstacles that it's going to take for me to get to a senior executive level are far greater than what it's going to take for my male colleagues. And because of that, I'm not sure I want to do it. And a lot of work is being done about how do you address the second shift concept that women go home and then typically still, and all of the numbers, there's lots of them, so I won't bore you with them, but really are doing most of the housework and the child care currently. So how do we help shift that so that they're doing an equal partnership at home, which would then enable them theoretically to break down some of these hurdles? Or in your case, being a single mom, how do you make that something that's comfortable and acceptable for single moms to be doing? So could you share your thoughts and your insights around what managers can do to help this and what we can do as an employer?
I'm laughing.
No pressure.
Last night, I have a 6-year-old, and she's kind of just a very new reader. So somehow we all four of us were in her room as she was going to bed, and she was reading to all of us, my husband, my older daughter, and her. And the ceiling light was out. And I just remember sitting there looking at it thinking, that would be out for years if I didn't change it. And even if I pointed out to my husband that light is out, he still wouldn't change it. Like, it is true, right? Like, I run a company and I come home and I run the house, and it can be frustrating. My husband's a teacher. He is a very active parent, and he's a great partner. And so I don't mean to be like dissing him in front of an audience, but there is something about that, like, okay, yeah. And, so I said to him, I'm going to just see how long it takes for that to be changed. And he changed it. But if I had have said something, it wouldn't have happened. It's a hard one. I mean, I, as I just pointed out, I am still guilty of it, right? I coach my kids' soccer teams. I change the light bulbs in the house. I still do the laundry, and and then I also run a company. I don't do anything else, right? Like, if I see my friends, it's very rare. I make it a priority to exercise, because otherwise I would go crazy, but that happens at like 5 in the morning. Other than that, like, I make a lot of sacrifices in my life to do that. And there's part of me that, I have a cold that I can't get rid of it, probably because I can't slow down.
So is it worth it? That's the question we always get.
I wouldn't change a single thing. Now, do I wish my husband, like, I would love to come home and be like, oh my God, the laundry's done? Thank you. But I sort of pick my battles, and that one is like, whatever. I personally am very fulfilled by it. I have a high energy level, right? And I have figured out a way to make it work. But I think the less we just change the light bulb, and because honestly, most of the time I would just do that, right? But I just sat there and I thought, you know what? It's not that he's trying not to share the work. It's just that he's just doing his thing, and because I always take care of it, he doesn't think it really needs to get done. Like, he probably thinks the light bulbs never go out, right? and so, sorry, it like literally happened last night. So just the act of like saying, honey, the light bulb's out and I'm not changing it, right? And holding back on that urge to like check it off the list, because that's just what I do, and like giving him, sometimes he will say, well, you just do it so fast. You never even give me a chance to notice it, because I'm, just doing this. So, and it's hard for me to just like, okay, I'm going to be at peace with the fact that there's 3 loads of laundry that aren't done and the light bulb is out, and I have to work on that myself. But I think the more we do that, I'm a lot about women empowerment, and not saying, hey, it's all on you to change and you've done us wrong, not to pick on you, but
you sat in the front row.
You're a male sitting in the front row. Thank you
Good
for coming.
you.
It's nice to see men here. And it's the same thing at work. You've probably read, I've done a lot of writing about the salary wage gap, which is undeniable, right? There is a salary wage gap. And my approach is not like, companies need to, I do believe that companies need to pay people the same. But my approach is, how can we as women make sure that we're getting paid what we should be paid? And some of that is, we don't love to negotiate, right? Like, my poor husband is getting picked on a lot, but I will pick on him again. I go to buy a car, I like to pick out my car. Like, I know what I like, I get in, I test drive it, and he's like, call me when you're ready to negotiate. And I'm like, good. I don't want to do the he loves it. He loves it. He loves to know that he got a good deal. He makes him go ask his manager 10 times if he can reduce the price. And I'm just sitting there going, oh, I hate this. Just like write the check, right? And it's actually fairly common between men and women, right? Well, then it happens at work. So I had a really interesting experience at Zinc, where, here I am, like, women enablement and same pay for the same job. So my head of engineering, who was John, who Rob knows well, came to me and said, hey, one of the guys, Adam, who's a director, wants a raise, and he's doing a great job, and I think we should give him a raise. And I said, great, but let's look at everybody. Like, just because he came and said he wants a raise doesn't mean there aren't other people that are earning of a raise. They just haven't raised their hand. So I said, let's look at the entire department. So we pulled a list of the entire engineering team, and I, of course, was horrified to see that the women were making the least amount of money, same title. And I know how, I run the company, I know how it happened. Here's how it happens. When women come and interview for a job and you make them the offer, 9 times out of 10, they accept the offer. When men come and interview for a job and you make an offer, you know they're gonna ask for more, and so you're ready and you know how much you're gonna pay and you gear up. What do you think it's gonna take? It's just, as a hiring manager, this is a fact. Now, I don't know if it's same in your industry, and engineering, hiring, and tech is highly competitive, but 9 times out of 10, men will ask for more. It is my experience. It's probably a fact, but my experience is the women don't negotiate it. I'm running a company. I have a budget. If I make you an offer and you say, I'll take it, I'm not incentive to say, oh, but here, let me give you 10% more, right? Because I hired you last week and I hired you 6 months later. I don't even remember what you got, right? But when I saw it on a spreadsheet, I thought, me of all people, I'm like all for this. And anyway, the empowerment of, sure, I can go back and I can change it. And I did. We basically said, same title, everybody's going to make the same amount. We didn't take anybody's salary away. We brought everybody, and there were some men that were under 2. We brought them all up. You have the title of senior engineer, you are making the same amount of money. You get promoted to director, you are making the same amount of money. So having bands associated with titles and not straying from them, I think is important. I also think it's important for women to suck it up, and even though we don't all love it, and I am included, learn how to negotiate and learn how, when somebody makes you an offer, you say, I really appreciate that, I've done my research, and here's why I think I deserve more, and role model and practice and get, before you go into the meeting, like do it in front of, think of their objections and what you will say. Like, it's gonna take a little extra work, but I think if we empower ourselves, some of these things, again, it's not that I want to pay men more, and I think most companies don't want to pay men more. It's just everybody's managing a budget. So some of it for me is women empowerment, and not just like we're victims, all the men should change. It's more like, hey, some of this just happened because nobody's bad, but what can we do to empower ourselves to make that change?
So along that same line, we have an ally engagement working group, and Rob is kind enough to help us with that, to really say, how do we help men be a part of the conversation? Because for the ones who want to get involved, that's not always a comfortable thing to do, especially on the manager front. How do you look at that, and/or what advice would you have to give for men who want to be part of the conversation or want to make sure that they're not repeating potentially detrimental things to women in the workplace?
Well, I have several thoughts. Again, I always come from what can women do first, because I think that's, I am a woman and I can control what I do, right? And part of it for me is women need to make it a welcoming space for men. And I do think that sometimes you get into sessions, and I've been in sessions. I just was invited to speak at a Google diversity event, and there were very few men in the room, but there was a panel right before me, and I won't name names, and you probably wouldn't know this person anyway. But I mean, I thought, God, those poor men sitting in here, they must feel like targeted.
Like
right?
your husband. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, exactly. I can do it to him. And I just, to me, it feels so wrong. And I think unfortunately, it's also happening in politics right now. There's such a polarization. There's such a I'm here and you're here and I'm right and you're wrong. Well, I'm right and you're wrong. And therefore, there's this us and them mentality. And I like to come to this from an approach of, it's us and us, right? In the world, we're all people trying to make a great place. I personally think that it starts with parents being involved in their children's lives. That's where making a great world starts, right? If you look at the mass murderers and the people that are doing bad things in the world, a lot of them had pretty unfortunate upbringings, right? So policies that encourage both genders to spend time at home with their children, and that means maternity policies, it means paternity policies, but let's remember, all of us who have kids, we know it doesn't stop after 4 months of maternity policy. Parenting only gets more intense, right? I have a 9-year-old who I'm like, oh my God, this girl, like, what am I gonna do when she goes through puberty? It's gonna be crazy, right? Like, they need us until they're launched, right? So flexible hours, right? We have technology now that allows us to work at 10 at night, at 5 in the morning. So if somebody wants to be home by 5 or 5:30 so that they can spend those few hours with their kids, we as a society, let's make that okay. So again, first of all, us, right? Like, make it a welcoming place for men. I want you guys to not like look at this on the agenda and be like, oh, it's another men bashing session where they're going to talk about all the things they did to us, right? Like, we're at fault for everything, so I'm going to stay away. But no, more of like, hey, it's not your fault. But let's all talk about, how can we be better parents to our children? How can we all have more variety? And not everybody's a parent, right? Some people love skiing or boating, and that fulfills them and that makes them loyal and want to perform for the company, so they should have time to do that too, right? But I think, again, that's how we can impact change, as all of us kind of not sitting so extremely on our ends and sitting together and saying, hey, like, I really highly doubt that most men want to pay women less. They don't. It's just, it happened, right? So let's just agree that it happened, it's nobody's fault, and figure out how to fix it.
Great thoughts. You mentioned a few minutes ago about the challenges with hiring engineers and how competitive the space is. Dish is very openly going after 2020 IoT build-out goals. One of our company core values is building the best team. And with that, certainly, we are also trying to fight for the best talent. What are your thoughts around how we build a more diverse tech workforce? It certainly starts with children being in school, but how do we, as employees of Dish, start looking at how we can impact that as well? Or how do you impact that as a CEO?
We always talk about the pipeline problem, right? I mean, and you go to Silicon Valley, and that's the excuse every time, is like, I really want to hire a more diverse workforce, but 90% of the candidates' resumes that I see are white men, right? Or Indian, or whatever nationality it is that is supposed to be doing those roles. So it's not an easy one to fix. I mean, I know we don't have any kind of a quota or anything, and I'm not huge on quotas. I think number one, we have a pretty high percentage of female engineers on my team. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's definitely higher than the norm. I think part of it is because we have a female CEO, we have a female CFO, right? Like, they go to our website and they see our management team and they think to themselves, okay, this is probably going to be a woman-friendly place. Now, you guys don't necessarily have that. I mean, you have some female leaders in your organizations, but I think the more that the company can show that they are friendly to a diverse workforce, the more resumes you're going to get in, right? It's those companies that say, it's a pipeline problem, I don't get enough resumes. Well, that's one way to not get any resumes, right? I mean, I know I have a pretty good friend who works at Slack, and he's pretty high up, and I mean, they do absolutely have quotas. I mean, that company is far, when I say here, they are far to the extreme. Like, you cannot hire somebody unless you have interviewed, I think it's like at least 30% of the candidates that you interviewed were diverse, and you have to have a certain number of diversity on your team. But I'll tell you what, I bet Slack gets a lot of resumes from women and from, just diverse populations. So I think, again, it's showing, having good policies, letting somebody know that, yeah, you know what, it's okay if you're going to be out the door at 4:30 or 5 every day because you want to be with your family. As long as you are doing a great job, I don't really care if you're walking out at 5. And then don't make them, like I can remember or even at SuccessFactors, which was very willing to let me be flexible, I still had that guilt of like, okay, it's like 4:45 and I'm putting my bag in and I'm going to hope, I want my office near the door so that nobody sees that I'm leaving before 5 every day. Like, make an environment where nobody questions anybody. And okay, so you're going to do whatever it is that you're passionate about. It doesn't have to be kids, but that's how we create more opportunities. I also think, I mentioned my own background. I did not have any idea that I could have been working in high tech. No idea. English major, it's a little different now, but I think, yes, more women in STEM, more diversity in STEM, but also the understanding that, how many of you guys are in a technical role? And sorry to point you out, but it's a small percentage.
Jody.
There's a lot of jobs at Dish that aren't technical. There's, half of my company is not technical. So, yes, more STEM programs. Don't tell girls that. My girls love Legos. They love Legos. And when I was a kid, if you loved Legos, your choices were to build a spaceship or a rocket launcher or, army guys. Legos were not friendly to girls. My girls, they build swimming pools, they build little cafes, they build shopping store, and Lego promotes it. The more we do stuff like that, I'm like, my older daughter's totally going to be an architect. The things she builds blow my mind. So we're getting there, I think, but I think from a company perspective, just showing that you're open from a policy perspective to make it more attractive, you will see less of a pipeline problem.
So being a CEO, you have enough oversight to know, are these policies beneficial? Does having a diverse workforce impact your bottom line? And what do you think when companies say, should we do this and what's the benefit? Again, to your point, you're not going to give everybody a 10% raise if they're not asking. How do you balance that, and what have you seen in terms of the impact for your company?
Yeah, I can't point to any particular fact or research on my own company, but I can think even more specifically at companies like ServiceMax and SuccessFactors, which were, much bigger. Zinc is still a little startup, but I was at SuccessFactors post IPO when it was a big public company, and I was the only female executive on the executive team. There were more women on the executive team at ServiceMax, but I can remember times in heated discussions with the executive team where everybody in the room agreed that we should do it one way, and I was the sole one saying, guys, we should do it this way. Here's a different way. Here's a different collaborative way. Or here's, I oftentimes was just, I had a different lens on what we should do. And sometimes it was because I am a woman. And we sold to HR, right? And it's a highly female demographic that we were selling to. And look, a lot of times I was overruled and the predominant opinion was carried out, but there were definitely times that people would listen and would say, hey, maybe that is a different approach. Let's take that approach, and it would prove to be a successful strategy. I firmly believe that the more diverse thoughts and opinions you have, the more ideas you have, the more empathy you can have to your market. We sell to field service, right? If we had a bunch of people on our team that didn't understand field service, we couldn't make great products for Nick and Rob and his guys that are here in the room. The same thing is true. There's so many companies that make products for women, but they don't have any women on their how do they even know? What if somebody in that room had a different perspective and said, hey, we should do it this way? So to me, I know there are studies that show that having more women in leadership positions drive performance. I just know it anecdotally that it's a different perspective, right? And it's not just women, it's the LGBTQ community, it's people of different ethnicities, right? Different, if everybody's got one group think, then like, why do you have an executive team? Just let one person make all the decisions. So that's kind of my feeling about how it drives results.
Awesome. So I want to open it up for questions, if you guys have them, which I assume you do, and if not, I have some more. But why don't we move into that section now, just being mindful. Stacey is very aggressively making a 2:20 flight out of DIA, so we're going to make sure that she has a few extra minutes to get there. So I'll go ahead and open it up for questions now. And she's definitely getting a speeding ticket in her Uber on the way.
Connor's getting the speeding ticket.
Okay, good. You'll have to negotiate your way out of it.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's been a pleasure working with your team, Zinc, to stand up Zinc for our technicians. Our techs really, especially the remote ones, they just brought a sense of community to their day. So that's been cool. My question is where you see the future of your platform going.
Mm-hmm.
What do you feel like is taking your platform to the next steps?
Who are you?
My name's Kyle.
I knew it. I should have said, are you Kyle? Hi, Kyle. Nice to meet you. Does everybody know what Zinc is? No, not everybody
Oh, we skipped
knows.
right to the good
Oh,
stuff.
sorry.
Okay, highlight reel, sync.
You would think I would say that right out of the gate. So Zinc is basically a communication platform for field-based workers, right? So it allows them to communicate with each other in real time via text, voice, video. So imagine one of these team members from the guys that are in the room goes out and they are installing a satellite or fixing a Samsung appliance, and they come up against something they don't know how to do, which sadly happens. You know, you can only train them so much, right? But there's probably someone in the organization that knows how to fix that. And what Zinc enables them to do is in real time do a video call, do a phone call, do a text, and get to the person that has that tribal knowledge and help them figure out how to fix it. So instead of packing up and sending someone on another day, that job gets fixed much faster. So that's what we do at Zinc, and Kyle was one of the instrumental people in helping get it launched. You guys actually were one of the fastest ever, launched in 2 weeks. I was telling Rob, we just had another customer, Cincinnati Bell, go live earlier this week. They did it in 3 weeks.
Way to go, Rob. And Kyle,
And
obviously.
they only have 600 technicians, so you guys have the record. So, you know, we have a lot of vision for what we're doing. I mean, some of the areas are, gosh, where do I even start? It's like a whole hour presentation in and of it, which we should actually do, is do a little roadmap, longer term vision roadmap session with you guys, but some AR, augmented reality, being able to like actually annotate on a video. So instead of like, hey, see where that wire is, to be able to like, you know, draw something that points to that wire. So a little bit of AR is in our roadmap. Doing a little bit more, figuring out a lot of tribal knowledge that's shared is really valuable stuff that right now it happens on a video call, and then great, you solve that customer's problem, but wouldn't it be great to figure out how to capture that knowledge in some way and then be able to serve it up the next time somebody has that question. So you type in a question and say, hey, I'm struggling with the XYZ. Well, someone else solved that a week ago. Instead of having to get on a video call, why not just serve up a short video that shows them how to do that, right? So starting to get into a little bit of AI and, you know, NLP, so that you're understanding the text of what's being asked, and it's automatically served up without taking a human to answer the question. What else? We've talked a little bit about some task management, like, okay, you know, we're helping you do the job better. Now can we just say, hey, did you do this? Did you do this? And checking it off. I don't know if that's as interesting for you guys. I mean, you're pretty firmly on TOA, but some of our customers don't have a field service management solution, so they would love to be able to, like, you know, hey, did you do the required steps? Some of our customers have like very specific rote steps they have to take. So some more task management stuff. I mean, we'd love to do the integration to Oracle. I was telling Rob, we just keep seeming to add Oracle TOA customers. So that's something that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Going back to what you spoke about today, I would like to know, what is your personal definition of diversity?
That's a great question. I think it is people that bring a different viewpoint to a situation because of some part of their demographic. Okay, so I think people can, probably the classic definition is women and, different ethnicities, different sexual orientation, but it can be age, right? It could be, oh, well, you're too young, you don't know anything. You're too old, you are not innovative anymore, right? So having different ages, right, to me is diversity. But really it's, you go in, like I have a really good friend who's in the fashion industry, and there's very few men. And the men that are in fashion are often gay, right? And so why not have some straight white men in the room saying, hey, I wear clothes too, can you pay attention to what I want, right? So Nick. So, to me it's a difference of viewpoints because of the background that you come from. What's
Great.
yours?
Yep, exactly. Like different viewpoints, different backgrounds, different education, different perspectives.
We'll do one more question. Maybe? Yeah.
So you talked about, sometimes leaving at 4:45 to make sure that you were home with your kids, but you also progressed really quickly. And so what were some key things that you were able to do to differentiate yourself against somebody who is also performing very well but leaving at 6 o'clock?
Well, the honest answer to that is that I wasn't leaving at 4:45 in my 20s. I was working my ass off in my 20s. And actually, I had my first child 3 days after my 40th birthday. So it may seem like I rose fast, but I'm actually super old. And those first, call it 18 years of my career, I was pretty much all work. Now, I'm not advocating that everybody be that way. My own personal experience is that I was pretty dedicated, and I was really ambitious, and I really was driven to be, I am driven by making an impact and being successful. I was never driven by money or title, or I wanted to make an impact and achieve success. And so I put in a lot of hours early in my career. And I would advise young women to do the same, right? When you're just fresh out of college, you probably can't be the one that's like, I need a little flexibility in my job. You got to prove yourself. And that's just the way it is, right? I'm lucky that I by the time I was having a child, I had advanced to a position where I could say, you want my skills and talents, they come with somebody who also wants to be a great mom. And not everybody has that luxury, so I fully admit that it becomes a challenge, which is why I think more workforces need to not make women have to make that choice, and to say, hey, you're 24 and you had a child, or you're really focused on something, you're a violinist and you need to go to your rehearsal, and not make everybody have that oh, I'm sorry, I'm leaving, that feeling of, it still happens for me today. I still don't think I'm doing enough at home, and I still don't think I'm doing enough at work, and that is just something that I live with, that maybe that drives me to do a better job in both places, and maybe I'm killing myself trying to do, but there's never oh, I'm so perfectly balanced, I'm a great mom and I am great at my job. No, there are definitely weeks when I'm I just feel bad, I haven't been in the office enough this week, right? And so I try to balance it out in the long run. But I will say that there is an aspect of, you have to earn success, right? You can't walk in the door and say, yeah, I only want to work these hours because I have something else going on, and sometimes you have to kind of get the respect to do that.
Great. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed. I certainly did. Thank you to Rob for introducing us to Stacey, and to all the guys in the room. Again, thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming.
We appreciate it. And our next event, we have some trainings coming up, getting you ready for PA season and the exciting time to negotiate. There was a negotiation training as well that we brought in a professor from DU. So if you weren't able to attend that, that video is up on our website as well. And then we'll share it in the newsletter next week again, so you have that as well. And beyond that, our holiday party, mark your calendars for December 5th. We'll be doing cookies and cocktails again down in the cafe. So that's what's up on the docket next, and we so appreciate you coming. Thanks, Kathy, for running a great event, Wes and Jeff for video, and Stacey, thank you so much for joining us.
It was fun. Thanks for having me.